November 1965. The Central Highlands of South Vietnam. The war had already been burning for years, but for the United States Army, this moment marked something new. This was not just another deployment, it was a test of doctrine, of technology, and of belief. Um, American commanders believed they had found a way to fight this war differently. They called it Air Cavalry. Instead of slow, vulnerable marches through dense jungle, soldiers would be lifted by helicopter and inserted directly into contested territory. Speed would replace caution. Mobility would replace mass. Surprise would replace attrition. At the center of this experiment stood Lieutenant Colonel Harold Hal Moore, commander of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile. Moore was a professional soldier, calm, methodical, and deeply aware of what he was being asked to prove. His battalion was among the first to be fully trained for helicopter warfare. If air cavalry worked, the war could be fought on American terms. If it failed, the consequences would ripple far beyond one valley in Vietnam. The objective lay near the Cambodian border, at the base of the Chu Pong Massif. Intelligence suggested that several regiments of the North Vietnamese Army were operating in the area. The terrain was brutal. Thick jungle, elephant grass taller than a man, limited visibility, and almost no clear landing zones. The chosen insertion point was designated Landing Zone X-ray. Moore knew the risks, but orders were orders. On November 14, 1965, the helicopters lifted off. The first Hueys touched down at X-ray shortly before midday. The landing zone was small, barely large enough for a handful of helicopters at a time. Soldiers jumped out and fanned into the surrounding trees, establishing a perimeter as the aircraft lifted away to bring in the next wave. Then the shooting started. It came fast and close, not distant sniper fire, but coordinated volleys from concealed positions on the surrounding slopes. The jungle erupted with movement. North Vietnamese troops, advancing from the Chu Pong Massif, closed in on the landing zone. Approximately 450 American soldiers found themselves facing an estimated 1,400 North Vietnamese troops. There was no gradual escalation, no warning. The battle began at full intensity. Moore moved constantly, directing fire, calling in artillery, encouraging his men. Radios crackled with overlapping reports, enemy contact on multiple sides, casualties mounting, ammunition running low. One platoon, led by 2nd Lieutenant Henry Herrick, pursued a small enemy element withdrawing into the jungle. Within minutes, they were cut off. Herrick's platoon disappeared from radio contact. Surrounded, isolated, and heavily outnumbered, the men fought through the night. One by one, they were killed or wounded. By morning, command fell to a young sergeant who understood the reality of their situation. He called in artillery fire on his own position. The explosions bought them time, not victory, just time. As the fighting intensified, Moore made a decision that would define the battle. He called for everything. Artillery batteries miles away began firing continuously, shells crashing into the jungle around X-ray. Fighter aircraft roared overhead, dropping bombs and strafing enemy positions. Napalm strikes followed, turning sections of forest into walls of flame. The air became thick with smoke and the smell of burning vegetation. But the enemy had adapted. North Vietnamese troops pressed close, sometimes within meters of American positions. They understood that proximity was protection. When the fighting collapsed into close combat, American firepower became a liability. At one moment, a napalm strike landed short. Flames rolled across part of the American perimeter. Soldiers screamed as fire consumed uniforms and equipment. Medics worked frantically, often under fire, pulling the wounded back from the flames. Despite the chaos, the line held. For 3 days, November 14th to 16th, the fighting continued. Attacks surged and receded. Ammunition was rationed, water ran low, bodies lay where they fell, sometimes unreachable under fire. By the 3rd day, the North Vietnamese began to withdraw. X-ray remained in American hands. The cost was severe. 79 American soldiers were dead. The enemy had suffered heavier losses, largely due to air and artillery strikes. On paper, it was a victory, but no one at X-Ray felt victorious. On November 17th, the operation continued. The 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment was ordered to move overland to landing zone Albany, where helicopters would extract them. The assumption was simple. The enemy had been badly damaged and was retreating. The soldiers were exhausted. Many had not slept for days. Their nerves were raw. Discipline softened under fatigue. The battalion moved in a long, stretched formation through elephant grass and broken terrain. Then Albany happened. Without warning, North Vietnamese forces erupted from concealed positions inside the tall grass. The ambush was perfectly timed and devastatingly close. There was no clear front, no safe direction. Enemy soldiers pressed directly into American ranks, deliberately closing the distance. It was a textbook execution of close-quarters tactics, designed to neutralize artillery and air support. The fighting became fragmented. Small groups fought independently, often unaware of what was happening just meters away. Men were shot before they could drop their packs. Others fell while calling for help that never came. Leadership broke down as officers were killed or wounded early in the engagement. Within hours, Albany became a killing ground. The time the firing stopped, the scale of the disaster was clear. 155 American soldiers had been killed at Albany in a single day. It was the highest one-day death toll for U.S. forces in the Vietnam War up to that point. Bodies were recovered slowly. Some were found days later. Others were identified by personal effects. There were no triumphant after-action reports. No celebration, only shock. Albany forced a reckoning. It revealed the limits of mobility, the dangers of overconfidence, and the brutal effectiveness of an enemy willing to absorb losses to achieve tactical advantage. For the men who survived, the memory of Albany never faded. When the Battle of Ia Drang officially ended, American commanders analyzed the numbers. Total American dead, 234. Enemy casualties, significantly higher. By the metrics used at the time, body count, territory held, enemy losses, Ia Drang was declared a success. Air Cavalry worked, or so it seemed. But beneath the statistics lay a harsher truth. The North Vietnamese Army had demonstrated discipline, coordination, and an ability to adapt quickly to American technology. They had learned how to fight helicopters, how to fight artillery, how to fight an enemy with overwhelming firepower. They had not broken, they had endured. Ia Drang was not the end of anything. It was the beginning. Both sides drew conclusions. The North Vietnamese understood the scale of the war that was coming. The Americans understood that victory would not be quick. Within a year, U.S. troop levels in Vietnam would exceed 400,000. The conflict expanded, casualties mounted, the war changed shape. Ia Drang became a warning written in blood. Modern technology could not guarantee control over a determined enemy fighting on familiar ground. For the soldiers who fought there, Ia Drang never truly ended. It followed them home, in memories, in silence, in the space between words when questions were asked and answers avoided. For historians, it remains a case study. For the military, a lesson. For families, a name carved into stone. Ia Drang was the first major battle between American and North Vietnamese forces. It proved one thing beyond doubt. This war would not be short, and it would not be simple.